producing that paper is subject to the environmental constraints that would apply in the United States. There being the papers, the mills are.
Just a reminder, we are officially live while we wait.
We often talk about global warming. Everything I understand about global
Okay.
Just a reminder, as we're waiting for the Senate to be finished with their session, that we are live, and please keep yourself on mute. Thank you so much.
Is this a test of the audio? Are we still here? Hello?
I'm still here.
Hey, yeah, we're still here. Yes.
They're finishing up. They're doing announcements on the Senate floor.
Okay, good. That'll be another 10 then or so. So Sarah, how are you doing?
Just a reminder, the stream is currently live.
I'm doing great, Mr. Secretary. Thank you.
Chairman Barnes,
Yes, sir.
how are you? Mr. Chairman, I really want to thank everybody for their patience. We were on the Senate floor and we're just making the best we can during these times. I appreciate you and Vice Chair Solomon, your subcommittee's indulgence. It looks like we're live streaming, so I think we're ready to go, Mr. Chairman.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Today we're going to be a joint budget hearing with the Education Business Administration of the Senate Budget Committee and the Appropriations Subcommittee of Education and Economic Development. It's great to be here with Chairman Barnes, Vice Chairman Solomon. Before I kick it off to the analyst and the panel, Mr. Chairman Barnes, do you have anything else to add?
No, sir. Let's get into it. Thank you, though.
Okay. So with that, we're going to hear, we're doing a higher education overview. We're going to hear from Ian Klein and Sarah Baker. Mr. Klein.
Okay, great. So everybody should be, bear with me one moment here. Okay, now everybody should be seeing the higher education overview, correct?
We see it. You're on.
Okay.
Please go. Continue.
Excellent. Okay, so we are going to begin on page 2, which looks at state funding changes for higher education. Public four-year institutions funding decreases by 2.3% or $37.2 million from fiscal 2021 to 2022. Other higher education increases by 1.2% or $6.9 million. This results in a total decrease of 1.4% or $30.3 million for total higher education as shown in the bottom row. These funding changes do not include the CAA funding found at the bottom, totaling just under $309 million that will be available beginning later in fiscal 2021, nor does it include additional HBCU funding as those allocations have not yet been made. A more detailed summary of these budget changes will be discussed in their respective agency and institutional analyses. Turning to Exhibit 1 on page 6. This exhibit shows state support for public four-year institutions. When excluding agricultural research and extension funding at Eastern Shore and College Park, total funding decreases by $37.2 million. Coppin State University receives the largest decrease of 10% or a decrease of $5.1 million. This is the result of the institution receiving $5 million or 10% of the total USM state coronavirus relief funding in fiscal 2021 that was not part of their base appropriation in fiscal 2022. St. Mary's receives an increase of 6.8% or $1.9 million as a result of their funding formula. Exhibit 2 on page 7 shows changes in state funding per FTEs from fiscal 2009 compared to fiscal 2019. Nationally, state spending per FTEs increased 4%, while 5 competitor states have also increased funding. Maryland's increase of 15% falls below only California and New York when looking at all competitor states. Turning to state funding by segments, Exhibit 3 on page 8. This exhibit shows funding per FTEs at Maryland two-year institutions. From 2012 to 2019, state funding increased by 53% and local funding by 79%. This, along with a declining enrollment at the Maryland two-year public institutions, resulted in an increase in state and local funding per FTEs. Exhibit 4 on page 9 shows state support and net tuition revenue per FTEs for Maryland public four-year institutions. From 2012 to 2019, state support increased by 34.4%, while net tuition increased 14%. Exhibit 5 on page 10 compares the 5-year percentage change in tuition and fees at Maryland's public institutions with our competitor states. In terms of the two-year institutions, the rate declined in 3 states and did not change in 1, while nationally there was an increase of 6%. Except for California and North Carolina, the tuition rate in Maryland and the other competitor states exceeded the national average by at least $206. For academic year 2020 to 2021, the average tuition rate for Maryland was $4,810, making Maryland the 21st most expensive state in the country. Tuition and fees at Maryland's four-year public institution increased by 2%, below the national increase of 6%. At an average of $10,130 for the 2020-2021 academic year, Maryland had the 25th most expensive rate in the country. Exhibit 6 on page 11 shows total undergraduate enrollment by segment. Nationally, undergraduate enrollment declined 2.5% in fall 2020, while Maryland's total enrollment declined by 2.4%. Enrollment decreased across all segments in fall 2020, as shown in Exhibit 6, with community colleges experiencing the largest decrease at 4.4%. It should be noted that the fall 2020 enrollment numbers reflect opening fall enrollment data and are subject to revision. Turning to productivity measures, Exhibit 7 on page 12 compares the 6-year outcome of all students in Maryland and our competitor states at 2 and 4 year institutions. At 69.8%, the completion rate at Maryland's public 4-year institutions, identified by the blue bars, is slightly above the national average of 67.4%. When looking at our peer states, Maryland's public 4-year institution 6-year graduation rate is above New York, Washington, and Ohio. The completion rate at 2-year institutions in Maryland, represented by the yellow bars, is 40.2%, below the national average of 40.4%, but above Ohio, Massachusetts, California, and Pennsylvania. Maryland's private 4-year institutions, identified by the red bars, have the highest 6-year completion rates of the Maryland segments at just under 80%, which are above the national average by 3%. Sarah Baker will now provide an update on progress toward 55% degree attainment.
So we'll start with Exhibit 8, and this shows that almost half of Maryland's hold at least one degree credential. So in order to meet the 55% completion goal, MHEC estimates that Maryland will need to have over 924,000 additional degree holders between 2010 and 2025. So in order to reach the goal, MHEC determined that the public sector institutions need to annually increase their degree production by 2%. And if you can go to Exhibit 10, please. You see overall that the community colleges and the public 4-year institutions have exceeded their targets. However, as you can see, since 2017, the growth in the number of degrees at the public 4 years has slowed and has declined at the community college. Now, MHEC estimates based on current trends that Maryland's degree attainment would be 52.8% by 2025, but it's too early to determine what impact COVID may have on the attainment level. So in order to meet the goal, the state needs to improve student progression from high school to post-secondary education. And if you could go to Exhibit 11, please. This shows the number of high school graduates that could enter the secondary pipeline, post-secondary pipeline. It is projected that the total number of high school graduates will reach a peak of 78,000 in 2026, but will decline by 6.5% by 2036. And as you can also see, the graduates will become increasingly more diverse. I just wanted to note that these projections do not reflect the impact COVID will have on high school graduation rates. And according to Witchies, they expect it to have a significant impact on the student pipeline. So for institutions to maintain and increase enrollment, they will need to develop pathways, programs, and services targeted to retain and graduate first-generation low-income students. And the state is also going to need to improve student progression from high school to post-secondary education. And if you can go to Exhibit 13, please. And this provides an illustration of the secondary pipeline, showing the outcomes of 12th graders who exited high school in 2011. And you'll notice that the first big leakage is 51% of those who earn a diploma did not immediately pursue a post-secondary education the fall after graduating high school. Overall, there are leakages. The other major leakage is that those who immediately enroll in college, only 31% will graduate before the age of 25. And the largest issue that needs to be addressed is the 66% of students who have a diploma but no post-secondary credential. So overall, there are leakages throughout the pipeline, and it will take all segments working together to improve student outcomes. And I will turn it back over to Ian.
Great. We will now take a look at transfer of college credits in Maryland. Exhibit 15 on page 22 provides the U.S. Community College bachelor's degree 6-year completion rate by category. The purple bar shows that after 6 years, only 14.2% of those who began at a community college ended up attaining a bachelor's degree for the fall 2013 cohort. When looking at the rate for those who successfully transfer out of community college, the red bar, the rate is substantially higher at 46.2%. There are many reasons why individuals are unsuccessful at attaining a bachelor's degree when beginning at a community college, as it is generally at the discretion of the receiving institution to determine whether course credit will be counted towards graduation, and as importantly, a student's major. The General Assembly has enacted several policy initiatives aimed at college completion, including the College and Career Readiness and College Completion Act. Among several items that this law was meant to address, one was a requirement that MHEC collect and report college credit transfer data annually. MHEC has not been completing this process, and DLS asks MHEC to comment on what steps are being taken to ensure that that it is complying with the requirements of CCR/CCA and when this data will be available. Exhibit 16 on page 24 shows the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on different transfer populations. As shown in the exhibit, two-year institutions suffered the largest decrease. Transfers from two-year institutions decreased 18.9% relative to the previous fall. DLS asked MHEC, the University System of Maryland, Morgan, St. Mary's, MICUA, and the Maryland Association of Community Colleges to comment on what steps are being taken to assist the transfer student population, specifically identifying actions that have been taken as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic to more easily facilitate the student transfer process. Moving on to the issues, which begin on page 25. Exhibit 17 provides the change in number of students enrolling in college after high school from fall 2019 to fall 2020. As shown in the exhibit, there has been a large decrease in the number of students enrolling in college after high school, and especially so from low-income, high-minority, and high-poverty schools. Exhibit 18 on page 26 shows the changes in enrollment by higher education segments, both nationally and within Maryland. As shown in the exhibit, all segments decreased in fall 2020, with community college enrollment decreasing by the largest amount nationally at 10.1%. Maryland's public four-year institutions decrease were in line with the national average, while Maryland's private nonprofit institutions exceeded the national average. Maryland's community colleges experienced the greatest decrease among the three segments within the state, but their decrease was far less severe than the national average. The American Council on Education surveyed college presidents and universities to gauge what their largest concerns were as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. As shown in the exhibit on page 27, exhibit 19, student, faculty, and staff mental health were among the top concerns. Exhibit 20 on page 28 illustrates that those concerns were warranted, as utilization of mental health services has increased across all higher education segments. After concerns regarding mental health and enrollment, presidents were most concerned with their institution's financial health. As shown in Exhibit 21 on page 29, the three-year analysis documented that presidents across all segments have reduced their financial health ratings of excellent and have replaced those ratings with good and average, which now represent a plurality of financial health ratings for fall 2021. In order to meet the needs of the student population, while also ensuring the safety of students and campus personnel, university presidents across the nation have modified their spring calendar, as shown in Exhibit 22 on page 30. 40% of all presidents indicated that their institutions plan to cancel spring break or other break periods, while more than half of presidents indicated that their institutions plan to transfer predominantly to online instruction with some in-person instruction in the spring. DLS asked the Chancellor, the presidents of St. Mary's, Morgan State University, MICUA, and the Executive Director of MAC to comment on the steps that have been taken to address education delivery and access for their students. Sarah Baker will now provide an update on Title IX regulations. And Sarah, I believe you may be muted.
It just provides an update of what's going on with the Title IX, and things are pretty much on hold to see what the Biden administration is going to do. It's pretty much, they probably will rescind it, so.
Moving to the DLS recommended budget action. This is found on page 34. DLS is requesting the annual report on instructional faculty workload for the public four-year institutions. This concludes our presentation. We would be happy to answer questions.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Klein, Ms. Baker, for that thoughtful analysis. Are there any questions from the subcommittee? Chairman Burns, I don't see any. Do you see any on your end?
I do not see any.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much. We'll now move to the first panel. We have the Secretary of Higher Ed, James Fielder. Secretary Fielder, it's great to see you. Obviously, the afternoon has been long, and appreciate your patience. If you just want to hit the highlights and then just summarize your response to the
Yes.
service question, would be great. Well, welcome.
I'll certainly do that. I'll compress as much as I can. Chairman Zucker, Chairman Barnes, and the subcommittee members, I really appreciate all of the attention and commitment to higher education that's been demonstrated. Higher education is actually one of the departments in the state that deals with people's dreams, positive aspects looking forward. And I would comment that Mr. Klein and Ms. Baker have done a tremendous job presenting very, very large amounts of data in a manner that's very easily understood. And we really appreciate that. I'm going to condense mine into two quick parts of the presentation. One, speaking more strategically, is more of some of the highlights for higher education. And Chancellor Pearman spoke to one of them yesterday, was the ranking of Empower now to be the number 8 in the top 10 for public research institutions. And also in the state to recognize that Johns Hopkins University is the top. So as a private institution, you think of these things in our state, we are so blessed with the diversity and assets. Higher education is one of Governor Hogan's top priorities, investing billions of dollars over the years. And that it has continued even with GEAR money, most recently $10 million for the community colleges to help support workforce development. Maryland higher education is leading the state into the future with innovation as a catalyst for change in our economy. And as each of us knows, nanotechnology, biotechnology blended into medical data analytics and deep data research being used for medical and cancer research is just phenomenal. Cloud computing, these things are happening now. The changes are rapid and they're accelerating. So we expect to see that to continue. You know, Maryland ranks second as the most educated state in the United States. We're first in the percent of PhD scientists and PhD engineers in our workforce. We're the highest concentration of STEM occupations. And you think about that, over 70 federal labs in the state of Maryland, they're here because of our workforce. Some of the most innovative companies in the world are here because of our workforce, which is all based in education, the full range of education, from private career schools through our 2- and 4-year private and public, educating over 300,000 people a year. Think of it in Raven Stadium at the max when it was full. We have more degrees per year than fill that stadium. So there's a tremendous amount to be proud of. Speaking about operational adjustments in a very tumultuous year, I was very intrigued by a recent interview I happened to pick up of one of our top institutional executives. And the reporter basically was setting the person up and saying, you're doing a great job in leadership. It's been unbelievable. Your communication, your crisis handling, you're just doing a continuing great job facing the economic turmoil, the problems that are happening with enrollment decreases, and now you're looking at budget cuts and a pandemic. Tell me how you remain calm and self-confidence and everything. And the president says, well, you know, it's been a more difficult year than usual, but I do well. I sleep like a baby. The reporter says, what do you mean you sleep like a baby? He says, well, I go to sleep and I wake up every 3 hours and cry myself back to sleep. You know, and it's one of those things that you have to have a little bit of sense of humor when you recognize that a year ago, none of us were facing and I'm going to list through what the leadership, the students, the staff and faculty have had to deal with on campuses: PPE, masks, social distancing, contact tracing, symptom monitoring, wastewater assessment, quarantining, online learning, hotspots in parking lots, professional development for faculty to be online, congregate living, dedensifying, furnishing laptops and technology, hybrid education, HVAC enhances, and it goes on from there. Any president can give you a 2-page list, and recognizing that it's a double whammy, it's a double hit, because those are increased costs at the time of reduced revenue. So that our leadership understands that the first year deferred expenditure can handle a lot of this. But if we get into this in the third year, it's why it's so important. And I appreciate that, knowing that the Senate just passed the Relief Act and hopefully it'll go through the House quickly. This is so important for our state to stay in the lead. Some of the changes that have occurred at MHEC within this last year, we've been very proactive, and we established a COVID advisory group made up of leaders from all sectors of higher education. The Department of Health, Commerce, and Labor are also invited, and the Maryland State Police. We meet every 2 weeks. We discuss a wide variety. In the very beginning, they started with a website on how do we define what this is and what are we going to face. So a lot of it was unknown, but the key to it, it allows the institutions to be able to communicate in a much more collaborative manner than has occurred in the past. So we have a shared website and exchanges of information so that institutions can see what the best practices are for each other. And it's been very helpful when you start to say, how do you do hybrid learning? How do we do the professional development in a way that we have courses now delivered online simultaneously? So all these things were new within a year. This is the most innovation in any state in 20, 30, 40 years to be able to turn this nimble, to be resilient, and to get things done. So
yeah, no, thank you. You know, everybody's had to adapt. Even this Zoom call is an example of us having to adapt. And obviously anything that you want to provide, either subcommittee, we will, you know, we are interested in, because we want to know exactly how everybody's adapting to these times. We'd also really just, if you wouldn't mind just hitting the high notes on responding to the Department of Legislative Services, it would be great, just because I know your time is valuable. And
I'm sure I do appreciate that. And to make it really quick, the act that was passed does not include the level of detail of data is not being collected, has not been collected down to examine how many credits actually transferred. We collect the data in terms of the successful degree and transfer, so we can tell you a student transferred from a community college to a 4-year, but we don't collect the data that says how many credits did not transfer. Some of the things that have been done in the last 2 years to try to help with that, and now with the pandemic, I think it's even magnified even greater, is the use of articulation agreements. We developed a template that goes to the community colleges and to the 4 years. And what this means is that a community college has an academic program that students want to take. The 4-year would accept that articulation agreement, and with agreement, every single credit in that articulated program transfers, so that the student knows as a freshman at a community college that with the right GPA, everything will transfer. So that's a big step. 2+2 has been, and dual enrollment have been increased, quadrupled. Scholarships, those types of things to make it compressed degrees so the transfer is more transparent and the students are spend a shorter amount of time in the institution. So in conclusion, I would just say the main thing is that all of our normal processes are continuing remotely, from the awarding of over $120 million worth of scholarships, fully subscribed on Promise, teaching fellows, the Collins, and so I can continue to name those, but you have those and those. So with that, I would turn it back to you, sir.
well, thank you very much. And we do have your written testimony, so thank you. I don't see any questions. Chairman Barnes, is there anything on your?
I don't see anything.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Again, thank you for your time. It really means a lot to the subcommittees. We'll now turn to the Chancellor of the University System of Maryland, Dr. Perman. It's good to see you again. You gave us a thorough analysis yesterday, so thank you for your time. And just remember, everybody unmute yourself. And if you have any questions, please use the reactions tab and use the raise hand feature. Dr. Perman.
Chair Zucker, Chair Barnes, I'm glad you're not tired of me already. I'll be brief and respond to the analysts' questions. The question about how are we going to make this transfer process smooth and easy so that we don't lose people. And for the University System of Maryland schools, these are critical students. We care about them. They also represent almost 30% of our total undergraduate population. Of course, we care about them. And we realize, as the analyst pointed out, that COVID is only going to make that pool shrink for a while. So we have to mitigate the declines and make it smooth. There are a whole bunch of steps that are in my response, my written response, that you can look at. I want to reemphasize the Secretary's highlighting dual admission agreements. I learned a lot about that, particularly in terms of nursing. Just as an example, when I was president at UMB, we need to do as much of that as possible. But I think the critical point I want to make in my brief time is that we need to specifically improve the transfer process itself. And here's what we've done. Together with the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, we've established a provost council with 12 affinity faculty groups from the 2- and 4-year institutions, about 300 faculty. And what they're doing is developing core outcome assessments for individual courses in order to make that process of, is this a course that can be transferred for credit, easier. But the primary focus, and this is my last point, has been on an overhaul of ARTSIS. We're working with a third-party firm to develop a better platform to update courses that are judged to be comparable. And with this upgrade, ARTSIS will automatically update the system. There'll be no more manual updates related to courses. But I want to point out that state funding has not been made available for this project. So we've been proposing that the implementation costs of making this major upgrade in ARTSIS be distributed on the basis of institution size. 37 institutions, they'd need to proportionately share a total annual cost of $892,000, in addition to a one-time only IT cost. Significant outlay. It's a matter of how to pay for it. My opinion is that it's important if we're going to make this process smooth, which I know everybody cares about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you for your time. Chairman Barnes, I don't see any questions on my end. Do you see any on your end?
Yes, actually, Vice Chair Solomon has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chancellor, it's good to, Dr. Perman, good to see you again, and was really happy to hear about the transfer piece, and wanted to thank your team in working with us on the transfer bill, which hopefully we'll be able to get through the process this year. I had a question to sort of follow up. I think this group of faculty is sort of beginning the process that I think many of us would like to see. I had a really positive conversation with Dr. Pines about the idea of having common course numbering and sort of a uniform system for gen ed. And you know, he was the one actually who brought it up, and he said, look, you know, we've been doing this within the engineering department at College Park. It's been incredibly successful. And I'm wondering what your thoughts would be, because I would like to sort of explore this as a next step, you know, on creating a common course numbering system, on creating these shared you know, uniformity among, particularly for gen eds, between the community college system and the USM, so that there is that seamless, you know, we sort of know you enroll at community college, you get your, you know, your gen eds out of the way, you get your associates, and you know you're guaranteed those credits.
That's an area that we are working on. That's what I would hope this Provost Council could look at further. Again, we have to find our way to an easier process. So thank you for pointing out what's going on at College Park.
And thank you for mentioning the ARTSIS piece as well. I've talked to some of your staff as well about it, and excited to see the product roll out and learn more. Thank you.
Yeah, very important. Thank you, Delegate.
All right, thank you, Delegate.
I don't see any other questions. Just reminding people, folks, if you have any questions, just utilize the raise hand feature. With that, thank you, Mr. Chancellor. We're going to now go to some of the presidents. We've got Dr. Wilson, President of Oregon State University. Dr. Wilson, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chairman Zucker and Mr. Barnes, Delegate Barnes, and other members of the committee. I too want to be very, very succinct and respond to the questions. You asked what have we done as well in order to ensure that we are making it as easy as possible in the pandemic for transfer students to make their way to Morgan. First of all, we have asked for unofficial transcripts to complete their applications. We realize that all students are really challenged financially, and even a couple $100s could make a big difference. We have waived the application fee. We have provided virtual tours of the campus for students who typically would come to the campus and take a tour. And then in addition, we actually put in place, Delegate John Solomon, we looked at what was happening with regard to our two-year institutions in terms of letter grades, and they shifted to pass-fail. And we here at Morgan did the same thing so we could have an ease of transfer from the two-year institutions into our four-year programs. And then in addition, we, as is our normal practice at Morgan, we kind of approached all of our students in almost like a client-like perspective. And so we call students. And so we instituted calling to our transfer students just to make sure that things were moving along smoothly. And if there was anything else that we need to do in order to expedite that transfer process, we were available to do it. I can go on and just kind of highlight as well. You asked me to comment on steps that we have taken to improve education delivery overall at Morgan. And we certainly have. We utilize dollars from the CARES Act initially. We upgraded more than 130 classrooms on the campus in a high flex capacity with cameras and technology. So a student ostensibly could stay in his or her residential hall and basically chime in on that class that may have 15 students live and still get a real good sense of the level of engagement in that particular classroom. We could never have done this without federal investments in the institution. We also realized, as you will hear from all presidents, that when we had to literally turn the switch and go 100% virtual, that 90% of our faculty were just not prepared to do that. And so we had to assist them. Yes, we did the obligatory things like faculty development and faculty training, but we also have hired an additional technology assistance to help faculty members who are struggling with the technology. We have hired an additional 100 instructional assistants to help them as well, so students will not suffer in this process. And so we really have been very busy here to make sure that we are listening to the needs of our faculty, the needs of our staff, the needs of our students. We have pushed back our academic calendar and we have eliminated spring break, but instituting wellness days to give students a break. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I need a break too sometimes because what we are doing, I mean, I say that jokingly, but I realized that in the course of our leading our institutions through this particular pandemic, that we as higher ed administrators, we also need to step back. And so I invited into my cabinet of 60 people, our counseling center, and had them to take the entire cabinet, all the deans, all the vice presidents, all the associate deans, through a process of coping, because we needed to also be armed with the same kind of skills to enable our students to get through this process as well. And then last, you asked me to comment on the faculty workload at the institution. We certainly submit that report every single year. The Morgan faculty, in terms of research institutions, continue to have the highest workloads in the state. By the way, we elevated our research mission. We didn't, but the Carnegie Corporation did in December 18. And so there are only 2 institutions in the state of Maryland with a higher research mission than Morgan, and that is the University of Maryland College Park and Johns Hopkins University. And so we are now a research 2 institution, high research. And as a result, our faculty should not be teaching over 7 courses per year. When you look at the other research institutions, they typically teach 2-2, not 4-4. So with that, those are my comments from the perspective of Morgan State University. I'll be more than happy to respond to any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you very much. I don't see any questions. Chair Barnes, do you see any on your end? Okay, well, thank you very much. Dr. Wilson, appreciate it. We'll now turn, and I have a Mr. Evans signed up, but I'm sure he's with you all, but he's just here to provide any technical or answer any specific questions. Is that correct?
Yeah, he's just here to make sure that we don't mistakenly give back $20.
Well,
that we don't have.
No problem. Well, thank you. Just didn't want to overlook anyone. So with that, we'll turn to Dr. Jordan, president of St. Mary's College, Maryland. Welcome back. And just be sure to unmute yourself.
Yep,
There you go.
there I am. Good afternoon, and it is good to be here. I am not going to go through our testimony, of course, and I saw most of you last week. So I'm just going to focus on the answers to the questions that you asked. Do you want me to just do them one at a time, the way, or do all of them? We just have.
Sure, you can do them one at a time, but just summarize. That works.
Okay. So the first question you asked us was about the transfer students and making it more easy for them to transfer into the college. As everyone's talked about, we have enhanced our articulation agreements, and we have articulation agreements either developed or in progress with virtually every community college across the state. We have also hired specific staffing focused on the admitted transfer student experience. We have we've held virtual events for the transfer students to get what they need, and we're implementing most of those things as well. And finally, and as an example of our working closely with community college, we have recently developed a partnership with the Community College of Southern Maryland, which is our local community college. It's called St. Mary's Transfer Edge Program, or STEP, which allows these students to take one class per semester at the college with a 50% tuition waiver. This program engages the CSM students with St. Mary's College students and eases their transition from community college into the St. Mary's College community. And that's our response to the first question. Any questions about that?
I don't see any. No,
right.
Please continue.
Yes. The second question was, what are the steps we're doing to address education delivery and access for our students? As most institutions that were open in the fall, we used a hybrid model of synchronous in-class remote instruction. It went very well. It put us in a very flexible kind of mode, so we can pivot very easily if we needed to. In the process of doing this shift, we're required to make significant investments to ensure equitable access to online courses and support services. We've enhanced Wi-Fi in all of our academic buildings and residence halls. We've equipped all the classrooms with technology necessary to support asynchronous and synchronous learning. We have also provided technology, including computers, and if needed, internet service to our students, regardless of whether or not they're on campus or at home, free of charge to them. And we have implemented online instruction and services to increase access to our instructional services. We've enhanced scheduling with faculty and support services, made it, provided access more quickly. Additional access to mental health services have been improved. Online courses have been introduced during winter and summer breaks that we didn't have before, and our evidence suggests that those activities or initiatives are really helping students who've fallen behind in their four-year graduation from the college and gotten them all back on track. That includes my responses. I'm happy to address any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that thorough response, and really appreciate it. I don't see any questions from the subcommittee. Chairman Barnes, do you see any?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's move on to the next panel. I appreciate all of your time. We're now going to turn it to Dr. Sandusky, with the Executive Director of the Maryland Association of Community Colleges.
And before we start that, Mr. Chairman, I just want to mention, you and I spoke. We thought it was important to hold the meeting since we were all here together, but I unfortunately did not plan for that, and we'll have to dip out here in about 15 minutes. But Vice Chair Solomon is here and can take over the meeting.
Thank you very much, Chairman Barnes. And we really appreciate everybody's flexibility today. We had to start late because the Senate ran a little bit over on the Senate floor, so we appreciate everybody's indulgence. Dr. Sandusky, please.
Well, thank you, Senator and Delegate. And you have my written testimony. I would just like to highlight, we were asked to respond to two issues. One was transfer. Yes, it is an issue. It is challenging for community college students. It's a national issue, as long with an issue in Maryland. The good news is that we are working with our four-year partners to try to resolve that. The chancellor did talk about the provost council. I think that's great. That's great. But on its own merits, it won't solve all the problems. One of the issues we need to have is to make sure we're solving the problems that we have. And the proposed legislation, the transfer legislation, I think does that. It gathers data and it requests rationale for any denial. And I think that'll go a long way in solving a lot of our problems. Someone mentioned Common Course numbering. Interestingly enough, if you all remember, in the Career and College Readiness Act, Senate Bill 740, that was one of the provisions that was compromised out of the legislation. But there was great feeling that maybe we should have gone down the road of Common Course numbering. The problem with it, it's got a hefty price tag. It's labor intensive for the 4 years. It's labor intensive for the 2 years. But it is worthy of revisiting. Now, you did ask what did we do in the crisis? We held college fairs. We had virtual college fairs. We had 120 participants, 120 colleges participated in the numerous fairs that we had for our community colleges. And this spring, we have another 100 colleges that have already been identified that will be part of the virtual college fairs. The other thing is we are digitally messaging that folks have got to come back. We lost a lot of students for a lot of reasons. We've got to recapture that 12th grade population that's taken the semester off. We've got to message that there is money out there. We're doing that for folks who don't think they can afford it. So we're saying to them, don't opt out. We can help you. The second part of it is, so what do those semesters look like? Well, virtual. And quite frankly, our students really didn't like it. And we've been in the business of online education for a number of years, but it is challenging. And for 12th grade students coming into the community college, they might not have had a great virtual experience when they were in 12th grade. So why would they want to repeat it? So we have seen that decrease. We have moved to as many hybrid and quite frankly, great clinical partners with the health department of moving to more and more face-to-face instruction. That's what our folks need. That's what our students want. And we're about moving as quickly as we possibly can. So it was one of the greatest challenges we have and continue to have was technology. You know, you would assume that in this day and age that all students have all the devices. They don't. They can't afford them. The second part of it is they don't have broadband. We were creating hotspots. We have folks at Howard Community College in the parking garage because of the hotspot, coming to do their work there. So we have spent as much money as we possibly could afford to negate the technical challenges that we've had. And then again, the last part is we are giving more money, and the federal money, we are absolutely just spending money on aid to get the students there and keep them there. And so I think we're doing our part. We quite frankly can't wait. This has been challenging for us. Challenges will make you better, but we need to get to that more face-to-face where we can meet with and deal with not only the intellectual, but also the emotional needs of our students. And I'll leave it there. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay, I don't see any on your end, Chairman Barnes?
I don't see any.
Okay, and you know that in the Recovery Act that was just passed by the Senate includes about $15 million for community colleges that's going to be appropriated through the CADE formula.
Yes, and I really appreciate that going through the CADE formula. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So we'll now, thank you very much. So we'll now turn to Ms. Sarah Fiedler with MCUA. Welcome.
Thank you so much. So good afternoon, Delegate Barnes, Senator Zucker, and members of the subcommittee. As the Senator said, I'm Sarah Fiedler. I'm president of the Maryland Independent College and University Association. We really appreciate being included today. We represent 13 state-aided private nonprofit institutions of higher education, and we serve almost 66,000 students. We operate in 180 geographic locations throughout the state. We offer over 1,600 approved academic programs, And I want to mention that in 6 counties, we are the only 4-year institution of higher education that's located there. And in several jurisdictions, we are one of the largest, if not the largest employer. We are extremely grateful for the financial support that the legislature provides to our students and our schools through the Sellinger formula. We believe that the state's return on this investment is huge. As with only 3% of the state's higher ed funding, we tout high retention and graduation rates, which were mentioned in the analysis. We outperform our national peers, shorter time to degree, low student loan default rates. So we were extremely disappointed that the BRFA cut our appropriation. And I know this is not that hearing, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. So we look forward to talking more about that in the future. The higher ed overview is well written and thorough, and I just wanted to thank Ian Klein and Sarah Baker, as well as the many other DLS staff who I know are working evenings and weekends in order to be sure that we got this in a timely manner. Regarding the assisting of the transfer student population, specifically during the COVID-19 pandemic, we are both greatly invested and heavily interested in facilitating meaningful transfer pathways for these students. Dr. Perman mentioned ArtSys. The MICU institutions are participating in increasing the functionality of that, and we're excited for the redesign. We pursue grant funding opportunities. We continually increase the number of articulation agreements with our schools and community colleges. And we regularly rotate in as co-chairs of the AAT Oversight Council, which I don't want to take your time to talk about it, but is an amazing teacher transfer pathway of which we're proud. Specifically during the pandemic, we have aggressively and creatively continued to try to engage these students, the student population. You have my written testimony where I listed many of the initiatives, but to name a few quickly, we have implemented virtual recurring transfer talks to speak with our administrations and transfer hangouts where students can connect. We've attended virtual transfer college fair sessions. We've hosted virtual admitted transfer student days, campus tours, and orientations. We've accommodated the pass, fail, or credit, no credit grades in transfer opportunities. We've waived application fees and deadlines, and we've increased financial aid support and scholarships for this population. So ensuring the health and safety of our students has been our top priority through the public health crisis. And each institution has assessed what would be best for its students and the surrounding communities. But as Dr. Wilson mentioned, we also were taken off guard a little bit in March when we had to convert to a virtual environment very quickly. And so I wanted to talk some about the plans that we implemented quickly in March, but also then a little bit about what we've done since then. We were able to provide a laptop loaner program for both students and faculty. We provided additional equipment such as webcams and hotspots, as reliable internet access is a major obstacle for many of our students and for some of our faculty. We adopted common online communication platforms. One of our schools provided every faculty member with a Zoom license. We expanded technology help desk hours so that evenings and weekends would be covered to support students in different time zones and on different schedules. And we provided technology grants for students to purchase their own equipment and pay for high-speed internet if that was required. We also implemented new technology in our classrooms to allow for simultaneous face-to-face and remote instruction, provide training for faculty members who would need to use the technology for the first time, and we retrofitted other buildings on campus, including residence halls for students who would be taking courses from their dorms. There are a few other points that were made in the DLS Higher View overview that I just wanted to touch on real quickly, if I could just have one more minute. The MICUA schools accept our role in helping to achieve the 55% degree attainment goal, and we look forward to helping to figure out whether our schools might be the best fit for some of those students who decide not to pursue post-secondary education, thus interrupting the pipeline. We have several institutions that draw predominantly from in-state students, and those that draw mostly from out-of-state students end up being a net importer of talent as these students stay after graduation and become part of the Maryland workforce. We have not been immune to enrollment decline during the fall. It seems to be attributable in large part to COVID and was more severe at our institutions that were not open for face-to-face instruction. But we're hopeful that this is a temporary problem. And we also know that we've seen more students express a need for financial aid than in past semesters, and that may have also contributed to the decline. So across our sector, we're working on this, and we have 1 in 4 students who is a Pell Grant recipient, which is a lowest income student. We used 87% of our Sellinger funding in fiscal 2020 for financial aid, which was $51 million. And through our Guaranteed Access Partnership Program, we match every Guaranteed Access Grant award for a student who attends our schools. That can be up to a $38,000 award. Further, we invest almost $300 million in institutional-based financial aid for students. So in conclusion, I just wanted to also urge the state to increase investment in financial aid for Maryland students. So thank you, and we're appreciative. We never take your support for granted, and we look forward to continuing the partnership that has spanned almost 240 years at this point, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Fiddler? Don't see any. Do you see any, Mr. Chairman? Okay. Well, on behalf of both Chair Zucker and I, we appreciate you all sticking with us this afternoon and also streamlining your testimony and getting through this. Looks like I made it to the end. So with that, any closing comments, Mr. Chairman?
No, Mr.
Well, thank you all. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.